Welcome back, metalheads, to a different table of metal. And the reason why we're at a different table of metal is because my brother is sick, and so I'm gonna be recording on my own because he's too dead to record. So, anyways, in this video we're gonna be discussing part two of my last video, which it was what is metal, what counts and defines metal, you know. And that video did not conclude. Instead, it was me putting out my opinions, my view as to what metal was, my brother putting out his view, and you guys putting out your views. Now, I'm glad that provoked all of you guys because I got overwhelmed with different opinions and views as to what made metal. Now, we're gonna dive deep into that today. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take each view that I've gotten, each argument that I've gotten, hold it up to the fire and try it and see if it works as a possible definition of being metal. Hopefully I can conclude it this way. We're even going to try my own view from the last video, the one that I strictly and strongly believe is metal. And how am I going to try my own opinion, right? How am I going to critique it? Well, that's the thing, I'm not. You guys already did that, and I'm going to bring that up in this video, my view and opinion on it, and your guys' critique on it, and flaws that you pointed out. So, I'm glad you guys did that. So, anyways, before we dive into it, I want to recommend an album to you that I recently listened to. It's called Lords of Death by the Temple of the Void. If you haven't heard them, I'm going to put a link in the description and listen to it whenever you can on your free time. I highly recommend it, okay? It's a death doom album. Who knows, I might do a review on it later if you guys hear it and want to hear what I think of it and so on. But as of right now, I'm just going to leave it as a recommendation because it's good, and I know how hard it is sometimes to find good metal music, so I'm going to constantly keep on recommending them when I find them. So yeah, check them out. Lords of Death, link in the description. Anyways, let's get into the discussion. What is metal and what makes metal metal? So, Godspeed, you brought up that metal is a metallic, shiny material that conducts electricity. Now, that is true. That makes metal. That is metal. Now, the sound of metal. What is the sound of metal? What counts as metal's sound? You know. So, anyways, I loved that answer. When you gave that to me, I actually laughed pretty hard. So let's try this argument, all right? This is going to be the first one up to go step into the fire. Is that metal is darker and heavier, or I'm sorry, just darker music, dark subject matter, dark theme, maybe atmosphere, and so on. That was a popular argument that I've gotten. So let's try that and see if it works. I am gonna have to say, sorry, it doesn't work because there are other genres that are dark and heavy. Rappers sing about, not all rappers, by the way, but there are some rappers out there that sing about gang violence, violence in general, rape, betrayal, and just dark subject matter, dark theme. There's even some that sing about suicide. There's some that use dark poetry in their lyrics. There's some pop songs that are just dark almost for the sake of just being edgy, but either way they're dark. So how come those aren't metal? So, also, not all of metal is dark. For example, Striper. Striper is, they sing positive Christianic lyrics, yet they're still the guitar driven instrumental, heavy instruments, they're still metal. They are metal, but the lyrics are Christianic and positive. You even have, like Peace Sells But Who's Buying. Yes, there are parts of this album that are dark, but for the most part, this album is anti-war, pro-peace. Most of Megadeth's lyrics are like that, actually. So, and there are other lyrics of theirs that are dark. Black Sabbath, who, a lot of people are arguing, use them as the definition of metal. Okay, well, those same people were saying that You know, they're the definition of metal, and they were also saying that metal is dark, themed darker music, and that's what Black Sabbath was. Yes, Black Sabbath was that, but you know, they also did a lot of lyrics. I would say it's 50-50. I mean, 50% of their lyrics were dark and really doomy and evil, while their other lyrics were you know, Sweet Leaf was about his love for weed. There was nothing dark about that. uh, NIB was about love. It was about a different perspective on love, and it wasn't really dark. Yes, Satan was a character in that story, but it was not a dark story. It was a romance story. um what's another one? Friggin' After Forever. Again, those are lyrics about that Ozzy is saying, do you believe in Christ or not? And in the end, Ozzy says, he concludes that song by saying, God is the only way to love. There's nothing dark about that. There's other lyrics that they've done too that are not all that dark. What's that one? Dirty Woman? That's not dark lyrics. It's just about some, you know, girl a girl that ruins man. Anyways, that's just the lyrics. I know some of you guys are gonna argue me and go, oh, but their sound. Now, yes, they did always sound dark and doomy, but what about power metal? Power metal is both lyrically and sonically not dark. You know, their nickname back then was happy metal. That was the nickname for power metal. People called it happy metal in Europe because it sounded happier. You know, everything was higher pitched. The vocals are clean and beautiful, sometimes even angelic, choir-like even. Very epic sounding, uplifting. The lyrics even are not all that dark. Sometimes they can be, but not for the most part. They're not. So I mean, Iron Maiden doesn't even sing dark lyrics. They do at times, but there are other times when they don't. So, you know, dark theme does not make metal. It can't. That does not work. That's a view that needs to go out the window. You can't view metal as dark. And I know some of you guys are gonna argue me and go, "Oh, but there are some metal. What about death metal? You know, that's dark." Yeah, I'm not saying it can't be dark. I'm just saying not all of metal is that way. So metal can't just be dark music. That's a misunderstanding you guys got from me in my last video when I said something about heavy rock, which we'll get into. I'll get into that soon. But yeah, I mean, this album, Leprosy, is about death. It's literally about death and terrors and dying. Scream Bloody Gore, the one before that, a Cannibal Corpse. I mean, they're dark, gory, bloody, but there's more metal than just death metal. I think most of these views that I got are from people that listen to only a certain kind of metal, and their view is true to that part of the music, but it's not true to all of metal, you know? Do you get what I'm saying? So, yes, metal can be dark, but you can't define metal as dark music. Or evil music or whatever. The next opinion that I'm going to get into, the next argument, is heavy rock. Now, this is one that I talked about in my last video, but there were a lot of confusions and people arguing me on that. And apparently you guys thought that in my last video I was saying that it just simply is not harder rock music, and that's just not the case. No, I said that it's true for certain types of metal, but not all. You know, I noticed the only people that say that metal is harder and heavier rock are the people that listen to new metal. And, you know, people that listen to Slipknot, Disturbed, you know, Post-Colony in Flames, and so on, say that, oh yeah, metal is just heavier rock. Korn. But that's true for what they're listening to. Yes, that stuff is metal. In my book, it's not. I already discussed that last video. But overall it is, because people consider it metal. And, well, it is. And it is harder and heavier rock music. That's, yeah. But, you know, let's hold that argument up. Harder and heavier rock music. Put it with new metal? Yes, that is true. New metal is heavier and harder rock music. Old school classic heavy metal? Yes. Black Sabbath, early Iron Maiden, uh, and early Judas Priest, and so on is harder and heavier rock music. But that's about as far as it goes. If you go to, again, let's use power metal for an example. Power metal is lighter. It's not always heavier, and like I said, AC/DC at times is heavier than power metal. Poison is heavier than power metal at times. Another thing to hold that argument up another thing to combat that argument is thrash metal. So harder and heavier rock. What about thrash metal? Thrash metal is not harder and heavier rock music. Thrash metal is punk music that's not necessarily harder or heavier, but it's more instrumentally driven. That's what makes thrash metal. That it's basically in Dave Mustaine's words, thrash metal is punk music with long hair. And I believe it was James Hetfield that said this. It was either James or Lars, but they said that that they were into punk music, but punk music didn't have actual musicianship to it. But they saw that metal did. So what they did is they combined the two and made thrash metal. So they wanted to make punk music that actually has musicianship to it, real musicianship. And that shows when you hear their cover of Search and Destroy. The original Search and Destroy is just a punk song, but when you listen to it in the thrash metal version, what's different here? What makes it from thrash? What makes thrash different than punk? Well, if you listen to the two covers, thrash covers of punk songs, you'll notice that the thrash versions are more streamlined with its instruments. They're more guitar driven. The instruments have more of a presence. They're more comprehensible, and yes, the musicianship is much tighter, and it's there. You can listen to Slayer's cover of "I Hate You" by Verbal Abuse. Listen to "Antisocial" by Trust, and Anthrax covered that song. Listen to the one that Megadeth did off their Dystopia album, Foreign Policy. You'll hear the difference between thrash and punk, and it's the fact that the thrashier versions again are more streamlined with its instruments. The instruments are more present, and they're tighter, and just there's more effort and thought put into there. They're more comprehensible. So yeah, there's that. It's heavy and harder rock is not always true. Yeah, that's even the case with atmospheric black metal. Atmospheric black metal is not harder and heavier rock music. It just isn't. It's mainly instruments trying to set an atmosphere, and then the vocals kind of guiding the emotion and the story. It's either heavier or it's not at times, but either way, it's not harder and heavier rock. Iron Maiden they sound like an orchestra put on metal instruments. They're not necessarily harder and heavier at times. There are times when they're not heavier at all. Fear of the Dark isn't all. The other half of the song is heavy. The other half isn't. It's more orchestraic. Listen to the A Matter of Life and Death album. That album really wasn't all that heavy compared to other rock bands that are way heavier. Back in Black sounded heavier than that album. Back in Black sounded heavier than what's it called? The Final Frontier. So, harder and heavier rock works for new metal and classic heavy metal, but that's about it. Yes, death metal could work as harder and heavier rock. It could work, but at the same time, the death metal for the most part brings complexity into the song structures, and therefore because of that, it varies away from rock music. So hard and heavier rock is a partial truth, but I can't say that could be used to define metal. So that crumbles in the fire to me. The next one is just heavy music. Another argument I've had was heavy music is metal. Now, this could work. This is one of the possibilities. I could actually conclude the video and say that, this could be a true definition of metal. The only argument and flaw in that is that there are other genres of music that are heavy, like dubstep. If you consider dubstep to be heavy, dubstep is heavy. You know, maybe we're all used to it. That's some of you guys are gonna go, oh, dubstep's not heavy. Well, okay, in that case, Iron Maiden's not heavy. In that case, Black Sabbath isn't heavy. In that case, Judas Priest is not heavy. All of the early, Dio's not heavy. It's like it is compared to the rest of the music out there. It is heavy. Dubstep usually gets the same reaction from old people as metal. Old people, when they see metal music, they're like, oh my gosh, whoa, that's so heavy, it's just so much, it's so, They do the same thing with dubstep music. They go, whoa, 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 this is too, too chaotic, the same reaction as metal. So, an argument of metal being heavy music, or heavy music being metal, why is dubstep not metal then? There are some rap music that's heavy. Alternative can be heavy. Alternative music can be heavy, and it's not metal. But again, those are kind of stretches in pointing out flaws besides the whole dubstep thing. Other than that, yeah, heavy music, I guess, could qualify as a definition of metal. So there's one possible conclusion. I would say heavy is a great definition for metal. Unless you're listening to, like, I don't know, power metal's not all that heavy. So there's another weak point in that. Let's see. Oh, extremity. So another argument is extreme music being metal, and this is another one that I would say is a good possibility. Metal. This is actually my favorite. The reason why metal is my favorite genre of music. As you guys know, I listen to all genres of music. I listen to all music. Currently, I'm spending more time with Spanish guitar music than I am with metal. But and even romance music. I love romance music. But anyways, that's way off topic. What was I gonna say? Oh, metal. The reason why, to me, it's one of my favorites is because it has the most subgenres in it. And the reason why that is, and it's constantly growing, there's more of them being born as we're speaking. The reason why that is because metal really is the extreme form of music. It's constant. Metal started from rock, with Black Sabbath, and then Black Sabbath decided to push the limits and transition into something different, therefore creating heavy metal bands. Then came Metallica and tried to stretch that into something different, made thrash metal. Then came along Death and Possessed or Sepultura, and tried to expand and make death metal. Then it grew into death metal. Then from there came, a lot of things. Okay, now let's back up. From thrash also came black metal. Then from black metal came atmospheric, and then from death metal became a different version of black metal, and so on and so on. The tree grows and grows because the limits keep getting pushed and pushed to more extremes. So, and you only see that in metal music. You don't see that in any other form of music. Yes, there are other forms of music that have subgenres, but not because they're being pushed to extremes, but just because they're done in a different style. In metal, it's all about pushing the extremes, and metal is also a really rejected and looked at form of music upon mainstream listeners because of that. They look at it and they go, whoa, this is too much, or oh, this is too who screams like that? No one screams like that. That's the point. The reason why they do it is because no one does it, and it's supposed to push it to an extreme. So because extremity is really exclusive to metal, I would agree with that. Yes, there are other genres that try to do extreme, but that only in their genre. They're not, like, there are some rappers that try to go extremely fast, and so, yeah, but that's not really being extreme music. That's just being extreme rap. But with metal, they'll do it. I mean, metal does everything. You'll hear them bring classical music and go, okay, what does this sound like on guitars, and do that. Some of them will go, okay, what would happen if we made classical music maybe put into this form and sped up like this, twisted. What would happen if we mixed rap and hip hop and made it heavy? What would happen if we did, you know, that's what metal is. Metal is just taking musical elements, structuring it, piecing it together to an extreme form so it can form something that was not originally there, but now is something that's almost like scary to touch. So I would count that as a proper thing. Someone who brought that up was I believe it's mtech01. Is that your username, your YouTube username? You comment. By the way, check out his channel, guys, if you like core music. His channel is really great. I'll put a link to his channel in the description here. Anyways, what was I gonna say? Oh, he brought up core music, and I'm glad he brought core music up in here because core music is definitely metal. Not everyone likes core music. I know I don't like core music personally, but that doesn't mean we can just cast it out and say it's not metal just because we don't like it, because core music is metal, and his description of it was that it was very the drumming was fast, it's fast paced in general, lots of guitar riffage, and either clean vocals or guttural vocals or anything in between. But he was really emphasizing on extremity, that it's extreme and fast paced. Now, yes, that is what makes core music, but that clearly doesn't make metal because there are other metal genres that don't do any of that. But he's the one that brought that up, so shout out to you. Now, lastly, we're gonna go into my genre. Hang on 1 second, guys. All right. Sorry, I had to fix something. Okay. Anyways, where were they going? Oh, the last argument there is my argument, and mine is that it's instrumentally driven. Now, a lot of you guys pointed out these few flaws and said, what about Iron Maiden? Or not Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath. In my last video, I said I would give Black Sabbath a pass because they don't match my thing, and a lot of you guys were saying, you can't just give them a pass just to make your opinion, your view work. And you know, you're right on that, but I don't think you're understanding. Let me combat this, all right, and tell me if it works. If not, then okay. But in reality, there's transformation. So there was rock music, and here's metal, all right? Here's rock, here's metal. Black Sabbath decided to do, well, what we were talking about earlier, push rock to its extreme. So what they did, and this is why I'm counting extremity as a good definition of metal. So, you know, you don't just teleport from here to here. You don't teleport from rock to immediate heavy metal. So Black Sabbath is kind of the transformation, you know. And honestly, Black Sabbath does not consider themselves a metal band. They really don't. Watch interviews with them. None of them consider them to be metal bands. They're rock. They see themselves as a rock band. They came from rock, and it's true. They came from rock music. Rock listeners see them as a rock band. People from other genres of music see them as a rock band that is respected by metalheads. The only people that say that Black Sabbath is a metal band are people like you and me, metalheads. Yes, in my book, Black Sabbath is metal. According to Black Sabbath themselves and rock musicians, they're just a rock band that did something slightly different. But metal kind of took what Black Sabbath did. Black Sabbath didn't fully reach metal. They didn't, as much as we like to say that. You got to realize we're the only people that are saying that Black Sabbath is metal. So, you know. And clearly, Black Sabbath is not fully metal. They do sound really rockish. My brother, actually, Isaac, the one that's usually in the videos, he says that Black Sabbath is more rock sounding to him. I say they're 50-50. That yes, they sound really rock, but they also sound like a little bit of metal. They don't sound like full of either. And the reason why, again, they were in transition. Here's metal, here's rock. They came out of rock and worked their way to metal, not fully reaching it. Other bands after them took after that, and then it became full-on metal. You know, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, the list goes on. All those heavy metal bands. You know, Edguy, I There's a ton of them, guys. So from there on, then yes, in that case, it is true that my definition works. Take Death's discography, for example. Take a look. Our first week on YouTube, we did Death Week. Take a look at that if you haven't. But death metal came from thrash metal. You don't go from thrash immediately to, Bolt Thrower. That's not how the timeline works. You listen to Death and Old Sepultura, Possessed and their Seven Churches album, and you see how they're thrash morphing into death metal. Bolt Thrower sounds very different than Death. And yes, I'm not saying that, Scream Bloody Gore or Seven Churches isn't death metal. It is, but you gotta understand that here's thrash and here's the full force death metal. They were in the transition of it, so they were like half thrash and half death metal, not full either, And that's kind of what I'm saying here. I gotta say the extreme definition is probably the best definition for it, because the whole transition thing is an example of the extremity. They're pushing a certain genre to a different dimension and seeing if they can push it to another extreme. But however, those cancel out my opinion on it being instrumentally driven, metal being instrumentally driven, because, well, the fact that I had to give those bands passes, the ones that did that, shows that there is a flaw in my view. I don't think I clarified what my view was, but it was basically that metal is instrumentally driven. Now, another argument I got was that, so if metal is instrumentally driven, what about Iron Maiden? They're a big part of metal. Sorry, there's a big wow. Sorry, I was reading something that popped up on the whatever. Anyways, you guys were saying that, okay, so if metal is to you is instrumentally driven, well, why does Iron Maiden, why does Bruce Dickinson's vocals, why are they so important? I don't know why that was so hard to say. Well, I'm not saying that vocals can't be the main point, but if you were to take out the vocals, the song, well, you know what? I'm not gonna repeat my opinion. It was there in the first video. Go watch it. But I guess we did come to conclusion. In conclusion, I guess the strongest point is extreme. The word extreme, I guess, is a great definition for metal. I'm glad you guys brought that up, because that flew way over my head. I never would have. I mean, I would have, but way later. So, let me know if you guys agree with that. Extreme, so far, is the best definition for metal. But yeah, see you guys later.